Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video. I'm back. Gonna be back. So want to go ahead and get to, listen, I'll say this. It was a busy Monday in the world of college hoops, but you always got the sense over the last couple of days that there was going to be some big news coming out of Arkansas, right? First of all, John Calipari, always an elite recruiter. Two, he's got a full roster to put together. As he said at the opening press conference, I went to meet with the team. There was no team. So you knew something big was coming. And I'll be blunt. As somebody who has covered John Calipari for years, I felt like something big was going to come on Monday specifically for one very specific reason. It was because Kentucky on Sunday stole the show in college hoops. Okay, that Mark Pope press conference was incredible. I think even Arkansas fans would admit that. Rupp Arena was re-energized. It feels like the Kentucky fan base was re-energized as well. And so you know that John Calipari was sitting back, watching it, seeing highlights, whatever, and sitting there saying, you know what? I can't let Kentucky have too much of this spotlight before I make my first move. And so the first big move, the first official commitment of the John Calipari era at Arkansas is as follows. As on Monday night, Zvonimir Ivisic, Big Z, 7'2" center from Europe, played 1 year of college basketball at Kentucky. On Saturday, he entered the transfer portal, and on Monday night, Big Z officially becomes the first member of the John Calipari era Arkansas Razorbacks. And so with that, I just got one question for you, baby. I just got one question. Can anyone stop the Big Pig invasion? Can anyone stop the Big Pig invasion as John Calipari is on the board? His first commitment is official. Big Z is headed to Arkansas. And oh, by the way, as you can see on the little ticker right there, you want that Big Pig invasion tee. Guess what? You go to AaronTorresOnline.com/merchandise. You can get one of these bad boys for yourself. Now, in terms of this commitment, I'll be honest, I'm not really that surprised, okay? So Big Z is kind of an interesting puzzle piece and chess piece when it comes to really these two schools, because he was a kid committed late in the summer. I believe August was when it actually became official. And it was a weird thing where, first of all, John Calipari had to battle his own administration just to get Big Z into school. There were issues with admissions. It took a while. I believe it took until like early October, mid-October to get him through admissions at Arkansas or at Kentucky. So that happens. Then you get him over here, and then the NCAA doesn't want to clear him. And so there was actually a moment in time where Big Z left for winter break, went home to Croatia, and there was a thought that he might not come back to Kentucky. And so I don't want to undersell the role that Kentucky fans played. Remember, they were the ones that put up the billboard in Indianapolis that basically said, free Big Z. And so on the one hand, Kentucky fans, you did everything you could. But I always felt like Big Z was going to be loyal to Coach Cal, brought him over, believed in him, brought him, fought for him both with Kentucky admissions and the NCAA. And so I always felt like this was the landing spot for him eventually. I always felt like this was where he was going to end up. And as a matter of fact, he does. Now, in terms of his game, let's talk about his game because I think it's interesting. First of all, really talented player. 7'2", can step out and hit threes. If you look at the stats, they're a little bit misleading, okay? Averaged 5.5 points per game this past year, 3.5 rebounds, one and about a half blocks per game in just 11 minutes of play, while also shooting 38% from three. And so he is that new age stretch five. He is that new age guy that is really good in the paint defensively. And I know Kentucky fans would argue, well, he got beat up a little bit. You know, the physicality, I think at times he struggled with. I'd argue the counter is that I think there are times that his length and size gave teams in the end. Big Z had 2 points, but 4 boards and 3 rebounds in 3 blocks in 21 minutes of play. Thought he altered a bunch of shots in that game. The Alabama win, Big Z, how about this? 18 points, 4 blocks to go along with 5 rebounds. And oh, by the way, there is, of course, the iconic opening game, 13 points, 5 rebounds, 2 blocks, 3 blocks, 2 assists in that first game against Georgia when he also went 3 of 4 from behind the three-point arc. So he's a very talented player. And what I will say, we only saw the surface of what he's capable of. Remember, he got to the United States. He dealt with illness. First of all, he had no preseason. That's worth noting. Comes in, gets to UK, has no preseason, no ramp-up period, no nothing. Then he gets sick. Then he's ineligible. Then he's trying to figure out if he's going to get eligible. Then everyone's trying to figure out, okay, well, what is the next? Is he even coming back? Comes back, takes more time to ramp up after being back overseas. And ultimately, he gets in and he's awesome. He wasn't a finished product, but I think you give him a full offseason in the States. I think you give him the opportunity to train with a strength and conditioning program all offseason. I think he has a chance to be really good. I also think it's on John Calipari. I think last summer, Calipari was in a tough spot. He had a ton of freshmen. He knew he had to bring in some older guys, some different guys. And I think and then he had the injuries in the preseason to Aaron Bradshaw, to Agana Onyenso. And I think by the end of the year, he had too many healthy bodies. So I think it's on Cal to say, Big Z, you're our starting center at Arkansas. Let's go. Let's get to work, all that good stuff. Now, what will be interesting is, first of all, what kind of roster is put together around him, and then what's next for Arkansas in terms of recruiting. Like I said, Calipari's best teams have really had a 7 or 8-man rotation. This past year, there was like 11 guys that were good enough to play by the end of the year. Everybody got healthy at the same time, and you were in a tough spot of trying to figure out, okay, who belongs, who doesn't, who's good, who's not, this, that, the other thing. And so Cal getting a completely blank slate, I think what it comes down to is, I think if you're Cal, you have to, I think, fill out this roster better than your last roster at Kentucky. Not totally his fault. There were a lot of injuries, but at the same time, Big Z has to be your starting center. The big question is, what is going to happen next around Big Z? First of all, from the high school ranks, I'll be fascinated. Boogie Fland decommitted on Monday morning. Again, I don't think that's a coincidence. A couple hours after that Mark Pope press conference, everybody's fired up. Everybody's jazzed up. Now, all of a sudden, you got to start your Monday with a 5-star decommitting. Is Boogie Fland in the mix? Carter Knox, the freshman, I believe will be in the mix for Arkansas. The famous chicken man emoji in his Twitter account and in his Instagram account. You'd have to think that he is a favorite to land at Arkansas as well. Fland, I believe, will follow Calipari. As of right now, that's the intel I have. We've talked about it before. Orlando Antigua is the New York City primary recruiter for John Calipari. Boogie Fland's a New York City kid. At least when Calipari first left, I was told that those Northeast schools didn't feel like they were in a good place with Boogie Fland and that he was probably going to follow John Calipari to Arkansas. Maybe after a week or two, it's changed. But unless stuff changes, I do think that is going to be a variable and a factor worth following. Also worth noting, by the way, Boogie Fland, Carter Knox. Jaden Quaintance is an interesting one. 5-star number 1 center in America. He seems to be truly reopening his recruitment, and I'll be curious to see what his next steps are. Because according to Eric Bossy, he will be visiting Louisville this week. So it appears as though Jaden Quaintance, number 1 center in America, is at least willing to listen to other schools. And then it becomes fascinating to find out if he would actually commit elsewhere. Obviously, beyond that, what's going to be interesting, right, is what happens with some of the guys from Kentucky that are in the portal currently. Listen, the big news from Monday afternoon, DJ Wagner, former point guard, number 1 in America last year. Things didn't go great at Kentucky this year. Part of it was injuries. Part of it was trying to figure things out in terms of rotation and this and that. But I'm going to do a separate segment on DJ Wagner later tonight because I believe he got kind of a bum rap. I believe Kentucky was the best version of itself when he was in that lineup at full strength that allowed you to get the best version of Reed Sheppard and Rob Dillingham. So I just bring it up. If Calipari could convince him, that's a heck of a 1-2 punch, two guys with major SEC experience. And so what are the other options beyond them? Aaron Bradshaw committed to Ohio State this weekend. It sounds like, or on Monday, it sounds like he's not in the mix. Adu Thiero, role player. Is that a guy that you can convince to come to Arkansas? Worth noting, he was tweeting about Kentucky shortly after the Mark Pope press conference. So we will see. But I'll tell you what, how about John Calipari, the first major commitment of the John Calipari year, the first commitment period? Zvonimir, Big Z, Ivisic. We will have more. We'll probably do a full show on Wednesday for the Aaron Torres pod, but I appreciate everybody's support.